Did Hollywood just prove that bigger budgets can create bigger disasters? Early 2026 has already delivered some painful box office crashes. Movies with famous stars, huge expectations, and studio confidence that vanished the moment audiences stayed home. Some failed quietly, others burned money in public. But the real shock is not just how badly these films performed, it is how many warning signs were ignored before the damage was done. Number 15. Melania, 2026. The strange thing about Melania is that it did not look like a disaster at first, and that is exactly what makes it interesting. It opened with attention, headlines, political curiosity, and the kind of controversy most documentaries would beg for. But box office is not only about getting people to look once. It is about proving the audience is big enough after the noise fades. The film earned a little over $16 million domestically, which sounds impressive for a documentary, but the problem was the reported money behind it. Amazon reportedly paid $40 million for the project and spent another $35 million on marketing, turning what should have been a niche documentary into a very expensive public gamble. The second-week drop made the story even uglier because it suggested the curiosity audience had already been used up. That is why Melania belongs here. Not because it was ignored completely, but because the financial expectations were inflated beyond the size of the real audience. In Hollywood, even a headline-making opening can become a warning sign when the price tag is this heavy. Number 14. Psycho Killer, 2026. Psycho Killer had a title that should have sold danger instantly, but the box office response was almost frighteningly quiet. In 2026, horror was still one of the safest genres in theaters because scary movies can turn small budgets into big returns when the hook catches fire. This one had a clean, brutal promise: a detective, a serial killer, grief, violence, and the kind of grim thriller energy that usually attracts curious genre fans. But the numbers never looked alive. The film opened with about $1.6 million from 1,100 theaters and finished with only about $2.5 million domestically against a reported $10 million production budget. That is not just soft. That is a warning sign. The second week dropped heavily, and by the third week, the movie had almost vanished from the conversation. The problem was not that audiences rejected a massive blockbuster. The problem was that even a modest horror thriller could not create urgency. Psycho Killer sounded like a threat, but theatrically, it became a ghost before it could scare anyone. Number 13. The Strangers, Chapter 3, 2026. The Strangers. Chapter 3 should have felt like the final knife twist of a horror trilogy, but the box office made it feel more like a franchise running out of breath. Horror sequels usually have one big advantage: the audience already knows the threat. The masks, the stalking, the home invasion dread, all of that should create instant recognition. But recognition is not the same as demand. The film opened to about $3.5 million domestically and finished with a modest theatrical footprint, which made the ending of the trilogy feel strangely small. The problem was not only money. It was fatigue. After multiple chapters, audiences need escalation, surprise, or a reason to believe the final entry matters. Instead, Chapter 3 seemed to arrive with limited heat, weak conversation, and a sense that even horror fans were not rushing back. For a franchise built on fear, the scariest thing was silence. It did not become a cultural horror event. It became another sequel that proved a familiar mask cannot hide fading interest forever. Number 12. Primate, 2026. Primate had the kind of horror hook studios love. Simple, violent, marketable, and easy to explain in one sentence. A tropical vacation turns into a nightmare when an adopted chimpanzee becomes violently dangerous. That is direct, pulpy, and trailer-friendly. And to be fair, Primate was not the ugliest financial collapse on this list. It made over $41 million worldwide against a reported $24 million production budget. But that is where theatrical math becomes cruel. A movie does not keep every ticket dollar, and marketing costs can push the real break-even point much higher than the production number alone. The opening weekend was respectable, but the drops afterward showed limited staying power. Horror can survive on modest budgets, but only when the audience keeps showing up after the first wave of curiosity. Primate felt like one of those January releases that grabbed attention for a moment, then lost its bite quickly. Its concept was strong enough to get people curious, but not strong enough to turn curiosity into a real phenomenon. The verdict is simple: scary animal, soft legs, and a run that looked better on paper than in reality. Number 11. How to Make a Killing 2026. The title promised murder, money, and nasty fun, but the box office never became dangerous enough. How to Make a Killing had a deliciously dark setup: a disowned man, a wealthy family, inheritance, revenge, and bodies standing between him and the fortune he believes should be his. That sounds like the kind of black comedy that can attract viewers who enjoy wicked, stylish, unpredictable stories. But the theatrical result was more polite than explosive. The film earned about $19.6 million worldwide against a $15 million production budget, which means it was not a catastrophic wipeout, but it was also far from a comfortable theatrical victory. Its domestic opening was only around $3.5 million, and after that, the weekly drops told the usual story. Curiosity arrived, then vanished. A24 can turn strange films into cultural moments, but not every weird little gamble becomes a breakout. This one had a sharp premise, but not enough public urgency. It looked like a film people might discover later at home, which is exactly the problem. Theaters needed a killing. The movie delivered a shrug. Number 10. I Can Only Imagine 2 2026. The first film became a faith-based surprise story. The sequel became a reminder that goodwill is not always transferable. I Can Only Imagine 2 entered theaters with name recognition, a built-in audience, and the memory of a previous breakout that had seriously overperformed. That should have given it a strong emotional runway. But sequels in this space are tricky. Viewers need to feel that the second chapter is not just repeating the inspiration of the first, but deepening it. The numbers were respectable on the surface, yet disappointing underneath. The film opened with about $7.7 million and made around $18.7 million domestically, while its production budget was listed at $18 million. That means it roughly matched its production cost at the box office, but theatrical economics make that much less comforting than it sounds. Once theater splits and promotion enter the equation, matching the budget is not the same as winning. The real issue is comparison. The original felt like a breakout event. The sequel felt like a much smaller echo. For a movie built on inspiration, its biggest problem was that the box office never felt inspired enough.
Number 9. They Will Kill You 2026. A horror movie can survive bad reviews, strange marketing, even a weird title, but it cannot survive indifference. They Will Kill You walked into theaters with a nasty little promise: a mysterious New York high-rise, missing people, a dangerous housekeeping job, and a cast that made the project look far more expensive than a standard genre gamble. Zazie Beetz, Myha'la, Tom Felton, Heather Graham, and Patricia Arquette gave it enough name value to suggest this could become a twisted sleeper hit. But the audience never turned it into an event. The film opened below $5 million domestically and ended with about $19.2 million worldwide against a reported $20 million budget, which sounds close until theatrical math ruins the illusion. Once theaters take their cut and marketing enters the picture, almost making the budget back is not really safety. It is a warning sign. The painful part is that horror usually has an advantage because it can break out fast if the hook catches fire. Here, the hook sparked, but it did not spread. They Will Kill You had the title of a threat, but at the box office, it barely left a mark. Number 8. Good luck, have fun, don't die, 2026. This title sounded like a dare, but the box office treated it like a whisper. Good luck, have fun, don't die had the ingredients of a cult curiosity. Sam Rockwell, a strange sci-fi premise, AI paranoia, time-bending danger, and Gore Verbinski returning with the kind of oddball energy that once made Hollywood feel unpredictable. On paper, it had personality. In theaters, personality was not enough. The film carried a reported $20 million production budget, but its worldwide box office came in under $10 million, with the numbers listing the worldwide gross at only about half the budget. That is the kind of result that turns a quirky studio gamble into a financial bruise. The domestic opening was only around $3.6 million, and the movie never found the second weekend heat needed to become a conversation. Maybe it was too strange for casual viewers. Maybe the marketing never explained why people had to see it now. But that is the brutal lesson. Weird can be powerful, but only when it feels urgent. This one may find fans later, but theatrically, it played like a movie waiting for streaming. Number 7. Shelter, 2026. Jason Statham usually gives audiences exactly what they paid for, but Shelter proved even reliable action stars can hit a wall. This had the classic Statham formula: a dangerous man with a violent past, a vulnerable person to protect, shadowy enemies, and enough bruising confrontation to make the trailer look like comfort food for action fans. But comfort food is not always a feast. Shelter opened with about $5.5 million domestically from more than 2,700 theaters, then finished with a worldwide total roughly equal to its $50 million production budget. That may sound less embarrassing than some disasters on this list, but for a theatrical release, matching the production budget is not a win. It is a problem wearing sunglasses. Action films need international muscle, strong legs, and repeatable audience excitement. Shelter had the brand of a tough guy thriller, but not the heat of a must-see theatrical event. The real issue is that audiences may still like Statham. They just may not rush to theaters for every variation of the same promise. Shelter did not collapse because it looked terrible. It stumbled because familiar no longer means essential. Number 6. 28 years later, The Bone Temple, 2026. The most painful flops are not always the worst movies. Sometimes they are the ones fans wanted to believe in. 28 years later, The Bone Temple came with franchise memory, horror prestige, and the shadow of a series that helped redefine infected apocalypse cinema. That should have made it feel dangerous, urgent, and impossible to ignore. Instead, the numbers told a colder story. The film opened with about $12.5 million domestically, but the numbers lists a worldwide total of about $58.5 million, against a reported $63 million budget. Box Office Mojo also shows the worldwide gross at roughly the same level, confirming the problem was not just a weak domestic run, but a global underperformance. Horror sequels can survive modest budgets, but this one carried expectations that were heavier than its turnout. The title promised evolution, mythology, and a new chapter in a beloved nightmare. But audiences did not treat it like a major horror event. Maybe the gap between legacy and urgency was too wide. Maybe the franchise name still mattered, but not enough. In the end, The Bone Temple became a chilling reminder. Nostalgia can open the door, but it cannot force people through it. Number 5. Mortal Kombat 2, 2026. Mortal Kombat 2 had blood, nostalgia, fan loyalty, and one of the most recognizable video game brands in pop culture. But the box office still delivered a brutal finishing move. This was supposed to be the bigger, louder sequel,
More fighters, more mythology, more tournament energy, and more reasons for fans to show up opening weekend. And at first, it looked alive. The movie opened with over $38 million domestically, proving the fan base still had power. But the danger came immediately after that. The run became heavily front-loaded, with weak legs and softer international strength than a franchise this famous needed. The numbers lists an $80 million production budget and about $101 million worldwide so far, which is not enough to make a theatrical victory feel safe once theater cuts and marketing are considered. The problem is simple. Mortal Kombat 2 did not need to merely open well. It needed to expand beyond hardcore fans. Instead, it played like a movie the loyal audience saw early, while casual viewers stayed away. In the end, the sequel had the punches, but not the staying power. Number 4. Mercy, 2026. A movie can open at number 1 and still look like a financial crime scene. Mercy had everything Hollywood usually trusts. Chris Pratt, Rebecca Ferguson, a slick, near-future setup, IMAX screens, and a premise built around artificial intelligence judging a man's life in 90 minutes. On paper, that sounds timely, commercial, and easy to sell. But the real twist was not inside the courtroom. It was at the box office. The film earned about $53.7 million worldwide, against a reported $60 million production budget, meaning it did not even match its cost before theaters and marketing took their share. Its opening weekend was just over $10.8 million domestically, which was enough to grab attention in a weak January marketplace, but not enough to create real momentum. The drops afterward showed the problem clearly. People noticed Mercy, but they did not rush to defend it. For a sci-fi thriller with a major star, that is dangerous. The concept wanted to feel like Minority Report for the AI age, but the audience treated it like disposable streaming content that arrived too early in theaters. Mercy won a weekend, but lost the bigger trial. Meaning Number 3. Crime 101 2026. Crime 101 should have been cool, expensive, and irresistible. Instead, it became a lesson in how style cannot always steal the audience's money. This was not a tiny gamble. It had a reported $90 million production budget, a glossy heist thriller setup, and the kind of adult crime atmosphere that studios keep trying to revive. The story had all the ingredients: a career criminal chasing one last score, an insurance broker caught in the danger, and a detective closing in as the line between hunter and hunted starts to blur. That sounds like premium popcorn for grown-ups. But the box office never matched the ambition. Crime 101 made about $72.9 million worldwide, which is only around 0.8 times its production budget. Even worse, it opened with roughly $14.2 million domestically from over 3,000 theaters, then dropped 61% in its second weekend. That is the sound of curiosity fading before the movie can build a reputation. The painful truth is that adult thrillers need more than polish now. They need urgency, conversation, and a reason to leave the house. Crime 101 looked like a sleek robbery movie, but theatrically, the biggest thing stolen may have been studio confidence. Number 2. The Bride, 2026. The Bride did not just underperform. It became the kind of expensive artistic gamble studios whisper about afterward. Maggie Gyllenhaal's Gothic reimagining had prestige written all over it. Frankenstein mythology, Christian Bale, Jessie Buckley, Jake Gyllenhaal, Penelope Cruz, a bold 1930s setting, and a romance horror tone that clearly wanted to be strange, stylish, and unforgettable. But unforgettable does not always mean profitable. With an $80 million production budget, the film needed a real theatrical event. Instead, it opened to just over $7 million domestically and finished with only about $23.9 million worldwide. That is not a soft landing. That is a collapse with velvet curtains. The second weekend made the wound deeper, dropping around 70%, which suggested that even curiosity viewers were not strong enough to keep it alive. The problem was not simply that The Bride looked different. The problem was that it looked expensive and niche at the same time, a dangerous combination when mainstream audiences are already picky. It tried to turn a classic monster story into a wild prestige spectacle, but the box office rejected the experiment. Hollywood built a bride for the big screen, and audiences left her standing at the altar. Number 1. Greenland. 2. Migration 2026. The biggest disaster movie on this list may have become a disaster in real life, just not the kind the studio wanted. Greenland 2. Migration had a surprisingly strong foundation. The first film found real life through streaming and word of mouth, giving the sequel a chance to expand the survival story into something bigger, harsher, and more cinematic. The premise sounded ready for scale. After a comet strike destroys much of Earth, the Garrity family leaves the safety of a bunker and crosses a broken world searching for a new home. But theatrical audiences did not treat it like an event. Against a reported $90 million production budget, the numbers lists its worldwide box office at about $28.8 million, only around 0.3 times the budget. Its domestic opening was about $8.4 million, and the legs were weak, with steep drops across the following weekends. That is brutal for a sequel that needed to prove the franchise had moved beyond streaming curiosity. The lesson is harsh. Popularity at home does not always mean urgency in theaters. Greenland 2 promised the end of the world, but the real catastrophe was commercial. For early 2026, this is the clearest box office crater. And that is the strange truth about early 2026. Hollywood did not just lose money, it misread the audience. These films had stars, budgets, franchises, and big promises, but theaters exposed the gap between hype and demand. Which flop shocked you the most, and which one deserves a second chance before history buries it completely?